disturb you all and welcome you to the Foreign Correspondents Club for our Wednesday evening programme, a literary evening. Before we get going, just draw your attention to a few things that are coming up. One is a rather sad thing, which is a GoFundMe link to help the Burmese photographer Ma Noor, who is living in Chiang Mai and was involved in a very serious road accident. He was hit by a drunk woman who is now making his life hell, apart from having knocked him off his bike. So there's a GoFundMe that's been set up for him. We have on Friday our pub trivia night, so if you want to have a go at that, there are prizes involved. And the next big event that we'll have is on Thursday, the 2nd of October next week, which is the, sorry, I've got it wrong. Tomorrow we have a big event, which is a film, Tab Ye, which is about the creative resistance in Myanmar, and it takes a look at these people who call themselves artivists and find ways of fighting the junta and the regime through art. So that's going to be quite a big event, and that's on tomorrow at 7 p.m. And then, sorry, next week is the governor of the TAT, Tourism Authority of Thailand. She'll be in the club in an exclusive conversation with Vincent Vichit Vadakan. Okay, and so to this evening, we're very happy to welcome back Teddy Spha Palasthira, who has presented on his books before. His latest book is Ho, Undercover, Ho Chi Minh's Covert Journey to Independence, which has a lot more to do with Thailand than we might expect. And it's the second time that Teddy's had a go at Ho Chi Minh. He's fascinated by the subject, as you're about to find out. He is arguably the most productive writer, Thai writer in English in Thailand at the moment. I'm not supposed to say his age of 87, because I always do, but he is remarkably energetic, and he's actually working at this moment on 2 novels. His previous books include Siamese Anglophile. He's done a book on great heroes of Thailand. He's done a book that's autobiographical called Addresses. And he's one of these rare people who is completely bicultural. He was born in England in 1938 and called to the bar at London's Middle Temple in 1969. He then went on to have a career in diplomacy, briefly, and a very distinguished career commercially in advertising. He ran Ogilvy and Mather and Dentsu Young and Rubicon in Bangkok, among other things. So I'm not going to take up any more time. I'd like to welcome Teddy back to the Bangkok Post. Did I say that?
Yes.
To the Foreign Correspondents Club.
It's a pleasure.
I'm losing it, sorry.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming as well. First thing I have to do is discover whether I can read what I've written. No, I can do without. So, thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. If you introduce me next year for another book I'm writing, I'll be 1 year older. So.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's nice to see all of you. I can see there's a few gluttons for punishment here, because I think His Excellency Pradap has listened to me before. And I certainly, our dear host, our MC today, Dominic, has heard me before at the Siam Society. And of course, Caroline, you've heard me before. Are you still here, Caroline? This is your last chance. You can still go home because you've heard this before. But I've made a few tweaks to the last time I gave this talk, which was at the Siam Society. I've also given it to my wife, Patricia. Stand up, Patricia. My wife, Patricia. Take off your mask, darling. And we live in Phuket, so I've also given the same talk. But every time in Phuket, the Phuket Rotary So every time I present this, I tweak it a bit, so just for people who are gluttons for punishment. So yes, this evening we're going to look at certain events, important events in the life of, the early life of Ho Chi Minh, as reflected in my new book, Ho Undercover. I've called our presentation The Secret Lives of Ho Chi Minh. The talk will be a discussion on the secret lives that he'd led for 30 years to secure the independence and the unification of his country. Oops, I pressed the wrong button, as I always do. That's it. Who's Ho? I like that title, don't you? Who's Ho? Well, Ho, well, for the young, there's a generation of people who will actually say to me, who's Ho? So this is for the younger generation who may not have heard of Ho Chi Minh. They've heard of the city, but not the man. So Ho Chi Minh was the charismatic Vietnamese revolutionary and politician who changed the histories of France, the United States, and Vietnam in the last century, and the crucible that helped shape the globe's anti-colonial landscape. The fall of Saigon half a century ago, on the 30th of April, 1975 to be precise, but for the new Republic of Vietnam, it wasn't the fall of Saigon, it was the victory of Ho Chi Minh City, now remembered as Reunification Day. But not everybody was happy with reunification. Approximately 2 million South Vietnamese fled the country to the United States, to Australia, to Canada, and a few to France, not to mention the deaths of 1 in 10 of the total Vietnamese population. 4 million people to accomplish reunification. For the Americans, it was the day when thousands of US personnel and South Vietnamese civilians were evacuated by helicopter. And it was the largest helicopter evacuation in history. It was also the day when the Americans fully realized that they had truly lost the war. Hands up, those of you who remember this event. Well, I'm glad to see that I'm not the only senior citizen standing up here alone. Thank you for joining me and being so honest. Oh, sorry, wrong slide. Right. It's one of history's ironies that old Saigon was renamed Ho Chi Minh City, a city that was more French than Vietnamese. Often called Paris de l'Orient, Paris of the East, a city that Ho had visited only once in his youth, and he only stayed there for a few months. And he didn't like Saigon all that much. I'll get used to this in a minute. Even more ironically, there are now more than 50 statues of Ho in the city that he never really felt, where he never really felt at home. But this is not the story of Saigon, but of Ho Chi Minh's early life as a wanted man on the run in Europe and Asia, who fought for the freedom of Vietnam, and for many years undercover and in secret. It's also the untold story of Ho's clandestine journey in Thailand, where he achieved things he he was never able to do before. As you will see, Ho's Thai experience was to be a major turning point in his revolutionary life. I'll get it right in a minute. Ho's youthful revolutionary life was shrouded in mystery and subterfuge, a man who lived many secret lives. We are not even sure of his birth date, partly due to unclear records, and partly due to his own making. To add to the mystery, Ho had dozens of names and aliases. And until 1941, when he secretly returned to Vietnam after 30 years' absence and took the name of Ho Chi Minh, bringer of light. See if I get the right button this time. Always on the run to avoid capture by the Sûreté, the French secret police, he had to adopt many undercover roles, including journalist, Chinese military officer, Thai Buddhist monk, Catholic priest, blind beggar, traveling salesman, Vietnamese peasant, and many, many more. Son of a modest but well-educated Mandarin official who refused to learn French and serve his colonial masters during a period of bloody military crackdowns against Vietnamese resistance. Ho's anti-colonial sentiments since childhood came to a head during the peasant revolts in Hue in 1908, when he witnessed many of his own compatriots gunned down. It was at this pivotal moment, then only 18 years of age, that the young Ho decided that one day he would do something, somehow, to free his people. But first, he had to put aside his strict Confucian ideals taught to him by his father and learn the culture of his colonial enemy to enable him to better understand them. To this end, he had to find an economical way to travel to France. He could already read and speak French. In 1911, under the name of Van Bar, he signed on as a chef's assistant on the SS Amiral Latouche Tréville, a French merchant ship berthed in Saigon. Ho was not to return to Vietnam for another 30 years. Is there any battery in this thing? Where do I point it? No, that's going backwards. Okay, that's it.
Is that right?
Yep.
So just keep it until.
It's the top one, is it? Oh, okay. Right. No wonder, been pressing the wrong button. So between 1911 and 1914, Ho sailed the seven seas and went ashore at ports in Asia, Africa, Europe, and America. His years at sea were the most formative of his youth. His first discovery No, it's okay. I'd like to control it. But, oh, right. Well, I'm glad there's an advertising break here. Having been in the business for so long, that comes natural to me. So his first discovery was that the Nguai Chau Au, the Europeans, were just as exploitive with their own people as they were with the Vietnamese. I'll get it right eventually. There we go. I'll keep my finger on this one. He worked with sailors from Brittany and Cornwall who were just as illiterate and superstitious as the most backward Vietnamese rice farmer. Marseille was his first French port of call, where he sat in a cafe with 10 francs in his pocket, and he was asked by the waiter whether Monsieur would like milk with his coffee. He was never addressed as Monsieur or Sir back home, and was always spoken to pejoratively as tu, reserved for inferiors. I'll get it right soon. Ho met many uneducated French who were thieves, prostitutes, and criminals, and he wondered, why don't the French civilize their own people instead of trying to civilize us? Clearly a reaction to the French colonial policy of la mission civilisatrice. I'm afraid to touch this damn thing now. That's gone too far. No. It's running away. The runaway slide. No, not yet. Okay. It's this one here, the next, okay. On his world travels, Ho arrived at many ports where only English was spoken, part of the vast British Empire, and of course, the United States of America. He decided that his Western education would not be complete until he learned English. In 1914, he arrived in England, where he took on a number of menial jobs, including shoveling snow from the pavement of London's West End establishments, and famously as a pastry chef at the kitchens of the Carlton Hotel in the Haymarket, under the famous chef Auguste Escoffier, who suggested that he give up his revolutionary ideas and learn the art of cooking. Ho is also remembered by the English port town of New Haven, where he worked on the cross-channel ferry as a pastry chef. And I've often said when I was doing research for my book, that if he missed out on being a successful revolutionary, he would have been a superb chef. Because on his travels, as you will see later on in Thailand, he loved to cook. Importantly, Ho's 4 years in the UK, mostly in London, helped him master the English language. He could already read and understand Dickens and Shakespeare. But more importantly, through his membership of the Overseas Workers Association, he made political connections with other oppressed peoples from Korea and India, and even Irish freedom agitators. Ho quickly learned to become a vocal anti-colonial activist in the English language. His adventurous life at sea and in England taught him the ways of the world, of both the oppressed and the oppressors. And now, age 28, it was time to learn the ways of the French. In 1919, he crossed the Channel, began his important revolutionary French journey in earnest. It did not take long for Ho, with his youthful revolutionary fervor and leadership skills, to actively establish himself with the Vietnamese intellectual and patriotic diaspora of France. So much so that he came under the scrutiny of the Sûreté, the French secret police, for the first time, although they were unable to put a name to this mysterious agitator. It was not until he signed himself Ngu Nguyen, the Patriot, at the Paris Peace Conference in Versailles in June 1919, posing as a diplomat and standing out like a sore thumb in his rented but shabby morning suit, when he presented his demands for Annamese independence to the Western delegation, and a personally signed letter to the US President Woodrow Wilson asking for American support. Ho was the first East Asian, Gandhi was probably the first Asian, but Ho was the first East Asian leader to publicly declare independence from a Western colonial power on the world stage. Ho was seduced by Wilson's evangelical speech, emphasizing the principle of democracy and self-determination, and a country's right to decide its own future. Ho's pleas were ignored by the European powers, and the US president did not even acknowledge receipt of his letter. It was another pivotal moment in Ho's development. Self-determination was apparently for European countries only. The Western colonial powers were not in the slightest interested in relinquishing their Asian and African possessions. Ho would never again be fooled by self-proclaimed, self-righteous, and so-called liberal rhetoric from the West. So much for liberté, égalité, and fraternité. For Ho, it was a lot of, well, I was going to say the English word, but I'll say it in French, conneries. Conneries is French for bullshit. Although Ho initially much preferred Wilson's concept of self-determination, his visceral hatred of French colonialism forced him to look elsewhere for support. In 1921, Ho fully embraced communist internationalism and became a devotee of Lenin. Lenin's message was simple. Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. Colonies were a source of raw materials and cheap labor to fuel their domestic markets for profit. Ho realized that Lenin's doctrine was the very antithesis of self-determination. From 1920 onwards, Ho devoted himself to the liberation of his country, developing his skills in political writing, debate, propaganda, and voluntary and revolutionary militancy. In 1921, he became a founding member of the French Communist Party. To keep himself in pocket, he took on a variety of jobs. He was a gardener, a retoucher, a photographic retoucher in a studio, and a house painter. And he earned a little income from writing for socialist publications. He also became a wanted man by the French Sûreté, who now had this picture of him and found himself constantly being shadowed, and now on the run. On the 13th of June, 1923, Ho hid in a dark Paris cinema, changed his clothes, emerged as Ving Chang, Jing Wang, disguised as a Chinese businessman, and boarded a train for Moscow. Upon arrival in Moscow in July 1923, Ho immediately reported to the Comintern. He had been their official representative in France as a translator, propagandist, and specialist in political mobilization. The Comintern was established by Lenin in 1919 to promote world revolution, unite communist parties worldwide, and spread communist revolution globally. Ho was soon promoted to become the Comintern's specialist on colonial affairs and an expert on Asia. This was Ho's first visit to Moscow, where he would frequently return to principally to report to the Comintern and to further his education in communism, and also where, as he often had to, he could find safe refuge from the French secret police. In 1923, he attended classes at the University of the Toilers of the East. In 1930, he was on the run again and needed to disappear from the world stage. He reinvented himself as Lin, a young student, and lying about his age, enrolled at the International Lenin School in Moscow. This was during a critical, dangerous period when the Stalinists and the Trotskyists were fighting each other, with Stalin's daily purges against suspects accused of having bourgeois tendencies. And he had thousands, if not millions, executed. Ho was able to survive, as he always did, by feigning to support Stalin in his writings. In November 1924, Ho was sent to Canton, China, ostensibly as official interpreter at the Comintern's consular office. But in reality, Ho's secret mission was to train and build revolutionary Vietnamese cadres of resistance for future infiltration into Indochina, and to launch an autonomous and homegrown communist party in Vietnam. However, he was painfully aware that he would be arrested and executed by the French government the moment he crossed the Chinese border into his country. He needed to establish a revolutionary base in complete safety, where he would be free to train and develop his revolutionary skills as close to Vietnam as geographically possible, and as far away as possible from the Chinese Civil War that was raging at the time. Ho decided to travel to Siam. Ho's travels in Siam in 1928, 1929, and 1930 are pivotal to his struggle for Vietnamese independence. His Thai journey was to become a major game change in his revolutionary plans. So why did Ho decide to come to Thailand? Well, firstly, the Thai border is less than 100 miles from the central highlands of Quang Binh province, as close as he would ever get to his homeland in safety. In fact, during his Thai travels, he often thought about returning to Vietnam across this border. But it was a dangerously impossible dream. Secondly, there were 30,000 Vietnamese immigrants in Siam, the largest Vietnamese diaspora in the world. Third, uncolonized Siam was safe from French and British colonial authorities, who sometimes cooperated to apprehend wanted nationalists and revolutionaries in the spirit of colonial solidarity. 4, northeast Siam and Vietnam's highlands, similar topography and climate, were ideal training grounds for guerrilla warfare and jungle survival training. The remote jungles of northeast Siam and the agricultural Isan country were also perfect recruitment bases to build militant cadres of resistance from the Vietnamese immigrants who are spread across these lands. Now, importantly, this was the first time that Ho was able to test his new Soviet revolutionary learnings in real-life conditions. The downtrodden proletariats from the factories and the streets of Paris and Moscow were trained in staging strikes, picket lines, and urban guerrilla warfare on city pavements. Quite different from the enslaved agricultural peasants of Vietnam who had to fight for their rights and their freedom in the villages and the rice fields of rural Vietnam. Thailand was to be his testing ground. From the 1860s, France had been trying to colonize Siam, and King Rama V therefore gave full support to Vietnam's struggle for independence. And his son, King Rama VI, gave Ho complete access and protection to travel in the northeast. 6, Ho wanted to get the Thai tribes, the Sip Song Chu Thai, living in the northern Vietnamese highlands on side, by learning more about their culture and language. The Thai tribes have never been supportive of the Vietnamese fight for independence and often fought on the side of the French. Ho's arduous trek across the northeast from Pichit in central Siam to Nakhon Phanom on the Mekong River would be entirely on foot on unmarked mountain and jungle trails and through uneven rice paddies, a journey of 1,000 kilometers. 6 chapters of the book describe this important and untold story. For the first time, Ho's secret Thai travels across the most difficult terrain that he had ever encountered so far in his life are revealed. This is Puluang Mountain. Time does not allow me to tell you about Ho's remarkable journey, the people he met, the dangers he encountered from tigers and snakes, the physical barriers that got in his way, as he hacked his way through the mountainous jungle with his loyal band of brothers, and the experiences he had gained as he started to assume the different roles that would later define his revolutionary life: teacher, medicine man, poet, writer, guerrilla fighter, and politician. Several books on Ho devote less than 3 pages each to Ho's secret Thai journey and his pivotal Thai experience. Was Ho's secret Thai journey a success? Well, for the first time, he was able to connect with the real people of his country, and certainly much more of them, like farmers, tradesmen, and artisans. In France, Russia, and China, he only met disgruntled Vietnamese patriots, intellectuals, and immigrants, and was rarely able to engage with the common folk. Secondly, with light arms, makeshift wooden guns, and no ammunition, Ho was able to develop skills in guerrilla warfare and jungle survival, and understand the techniques of camouflage and concealment under real-life conditions. His arduous Thai journey was a soft version of Mao's historic Long March, a symbol of Chinese resilience, inspiration, and fighting spirit. Thirdly, he was able to do what he did best, and that was to learn and teach the common folk about the importance of a free, independent Vietnam. He never lectured his flock, but peppered his down-to-earth stories with folktales, poetry, music, drama, history, with colorful hyperbole. He always left his audience energized, enthralled, and ready to join his cause. Fourthly, he started to breed a group of loyal lieutenants ready to die for their country, and those who survived would one day become future leaders. A future minister of education, a future ambassador to China, a future government inspector, all traveled with Ho and shared his Thai experience. Fifthly, he met and trained many Thai Viets who would one day help him win over the Thai tribes to his cause. Sixth, from his experience with clumping bamboo forests in Phetchabun and Leh provinces, he would one day compose his famous bamboo philosophy. In our fight against the enemy's air force and artillery, we only have bamboo spikes. It became a simple icon of resourcefulness for his people during Vietnam's dark days of war with the French and the Americans, and a defiant morale booster. On the battlefield, sharpened bamboo spikes coated with human faces, placed in camouflage pits for the enemy to fall into, was psychologically the US soldiers' most feared Viet Cong weapon. Seventhly, and most important of all, Ho was able to write and publish his revolutionary newspapers and pamphlets and smuggle them across the border to Vietnam, a luxury that was denied to him in France. Ho was a prolific political writer, and he lugged his beloved Remington typewriter with him throughout his Thai trek. It was during his Thai trek that Ho was able to develop and practice his revolutionary creed: mobility, simplicity, privation, and resourcefulness. In December 1929, he was sent to Hong Kong by the Comintern to intervene and end a dispute between various factions of the Vietnamese Communist parties. Through sheer determination, political machination, wheeling and dealing, plus Ho's revolutionary charisma, and armed with the Comintern's big stick, he was able to settle their differences and, importantly, created the unified Indo-Chinese Communist Party that was acceptable to the Comintern. Ho was now 39 years old, and he had become a skilled politician. In 1930, in late 1930, the French Sûreté had finally caught up with him again, and he was arrested by British Special Branch in Hong Kong. A British lawyer, Frank Loseby, managed to extricate him from prison, alleging that he was illegally imprisoned, as Ho had not committed a crime in Hong Kong. And until proven guilty, he could not be extradited to France, where he would be facing the guillotine. Loseby then arranged a false death certificate and placed an announcement of his death from tuberculosis in the European press. Officially dead, Ho's criminal file at the Sûreté Paris headquarters was finally closed. End of story. There's more coming. Ho disappeared from the world stage and became, as you may recall, Lin, the young shaven-head student in Moscow, where he remained undercover until he returned to China in 1938. And here in China, he started to consolidate the internal and external groups of the Indo-Chinese Communist Party and founded the Militant League for Independence of Vietnam, the Viet Minh. And the Viet Minh is a league and not a guerrilla army as later called by the press in the West. With the help of his trusted comrade, Vo Nguyen Giap, a school teacher who had a passion for history and whose wife had died in a French prison, he started to build his Viet Minh power base. It was now time for action. In 1941, Ho came in from the cold and crossed the border into Vietnam. He had been away for 30 years. From Ho's secret base in Pak Bo Cave, well hidden in the mountains of North Vietnam, the newly formed 1st Army Propaganda Brigade of 31 men, 3 women, 1 light machine gun, 17 modern rifles, 2 revolvers and 14 old flintlocks, together with the skills and the knowledge of guerrilla tactics and revolutionary ingenuity that Ho had garnered from his Thai trek, plus his ragtag army of youthful volunteers that grew into a formidable force of 30,000 peasants and patriots. The Viet Minh was eventually able to defeat a US-equipped force of 15,000 crack French troops and superior firepower, including the latest American artillery, rifles, and mortars, M24 tanks, 2 parachute brigades, several foreign legion infantries, and B-24 bombers for tactical air support, evacuation helicopters, even US helmets and uniforms. On the 7th of May, 1954 at Dien Bien Phu, at a junction of mountain roads between China, Laos, and Vietnam, Ho, Giap, and their young patriots trapped and defeated the French professional army, the first defeat of modern Western forces by an Asian guerrilla army. This epic battle and ignominious defeat shocked the Western world and gave huge encouragement to nascent independent movements and resistance partisans around the colonial world, leading to the final decolonization of Asia and Africa. The rest, as they say, is history. After years of hiding, operating undercover, and keeping his identity a secret, Ho Chi Minh, all at once, became the most famous revolutionary in the world. Let us now look at Ho's other secret lives. Throughout his life, Ho had an unrequited love. He had an unrequited love affair with America, a country that he was later to defeat in war. Ho's first port of call in America in his early seafaring days was Boston in 1912. We are not sure how long Ho remained in the United States, but we do know that he worked as a pastry chef, surprise, surprise, at the bakery of the Parker House Hotel, still standing today, and the city's oldest hotel. We also know that he stayed in New York and visited other cities on the eastern seaboard. Although he witnessed the ill treatment of colored peoples in America, he still felt that of all the Western colonial countries, the American democratic system was preferably the most acceptable. He studied the history of the American War of Independence from colonial rule and admired George Washington, holding him up as his role model and a great revolutionary. Even though he was rudely ignored by President Wilson at Versailles in 1919, he never considered the US as his enemy and bore no personal grudge towards Americans. Ho was also an admirer of President Roosevelt, who famously said that French misrule in Indochina represented colonialism at its worst. In 1930, Roosevelt told his Secretary of State that, and here I quote, "France had the country for nearly 100 years, and the people are worse off than they were in the beginning," end of quote. Roosevelt's strong anti-colonial sentiments were often made known to Churchill, much to the latter's visible annoyance, and to Stalin, much, I should imagine, to his secret delight, at the various conferences they held together to plan for the post-war period. In 1944, Ho became an ally of America in the war against Japan, their common enemy. Codenamed Lucius, Ho worked in close cooperation with the American Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. Does anybody know what the OSS is? CIA, yes, it's the precursor of the famous CIA. And one of Ho's most supportive acts was to instruct his people to help rescue downed US pilots. Through airdrops, the OSS supplied Ho with weapons, and on one occasion flew in an American medic who injected Ho with quinine and saved Ho's life. An American had saved Ho Chi Minh's life. Think about that for a moment. This was Ho's big opportunity to bring the Americans on board and get their help in throwing out the French from his country. And he rhetorically told his sympathetic American allies, "Am I different from your George Washington? Was not Washington considered a revolutionary? I too want to set my people free." When the Japanese were defeated in 1945, Ho, accompanied by American officers of the OSS, entered Hanoi in triumph and fanfare. On the 2nd of December, at Ba Dinh Square, Ho declared the independence of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam before a vast, enthusiastic crowd of 300,000 people. This is the first time as many Vietnamese got together in one place, 300,000 people. That's a lot of people at that time. And he began his speech with these hallowed words from the American Declaration, the US Declaration of Independence. "All men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Meanwhile, United States Army, Air Force aircraft flew above in salute, and American representatives on the ground applauded and smiled at Ho Chi Minh in approval. Alas, on the 15th of April, 1945, President Roosevelt died. His successor, President Truman, decided that self-determination for a small, unknown French colony in faraway Southeast Asia was less important than establishing strong post-war relations with France, a vital bulwark against communism in Europe. Eight separate appeals from Ho to President Truman and the Secretary of State over a period of 5 months asking for US support went unanswered. as well as an unsuccessful approach to the US Embassy in Bangkok, where Ho was hoping to get support from his wartime OSS friends, among them Jim Thompson, who called Ho the George Washington of Vietnam. If you want to read more of the relationship between Ho and Jim Thompson, this is the book to get. In November 1945, in a final emotional bid to the Americans for help, this is what Ho said: I was a communist, but I'm no longer one. I'm a member of the Vietnamese family, nothing else, but to no avail. 20 years later, America and Vietnam were at war. It was a tragedy of lost opportunities. The Americans, LBJ, that's a cartoon of LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president, failed to understand that Ho and his Viet Minh followers were nationalists at heart, and an effective nationalist state must take precedence over a communist state. Let's look at some of Ho's other secrets. Young Vietnamese today are taught to learn and follow the moral examples of Uncle Ho, the father of the nation, who often told his people, I have no wife, no home, and no children. Was he or was he not married? Contrary to official Vietnamese biographies, there is evidence to show that Ho had been married twice. The first time to Zen Zhu Ming, daughter of a Chinese merchant during Ho's years in Canton in 1926. And his second wife, Ngu Nguyen Thi Minh Khai, an activist who worked with Ho in Hong Kong and who later joined him in Moscow in 1930. She was executed by the French in Saigon in 1941. Less certain was Ho's putative affair with Mae West, the Hollywood star of the silent movie era. If we are to believe her, they met in the corridor of the Carlton Hotel in London in 1915. He had the slinkiest eyes, she was reported to have said. Ho was a heavy smoker, and he loved his American Lucky Strike cigarettes. When interviewed by Richard Hughes, correspondent from the Melbourne Herald, during the height of the Vietnam War, on how he obtained these American cigarettes, Ho replied, I don't discuss state secrets. Sorry, wrong button again. So to fully understand Ho Chi Minh, we must know that he frequently argued with his Comintern superiors in Moscow that national liberation from colonial rule had to take precedence over communist conversion. Throughout his life, Ho played both sides and was prepared to sacrifice everyone, often displaying his dark side, and executed 300,000 people of his people who did not agree with his policies. And he was prepared to sacrifice everything in which the freedom of Vietnam was his only option. Part 2 of my book is a fictional story of Wong, a young Thai-Viet idealist who falls under the magnetic spell of Ho and follows him from the safety of his home in Pichit to the battlefields of Vietnam. He ends up becoming Ho's political agent. Although Wong is a fictional character, the historical events that shaped his risk-taking life are real. thank you for being so patient. And I hope that you will obtain my book at a discount, 10%, I understand. And if you want a Thai copy, I'm afraid you'll have to go online for that. Thank you very much again. Thank you. Oh, I'm requested by your president to come and sit here on my own. There's no chair here. I'm the only chief. Okay. You're not going to sit and hold my hand? What am I supposed to be doing here?
You're going to be interrogated, and we have a microphone at the end for other people to join in. As I said in the introduction, you're remarkably productive.
Thank you.
But this, how did you go about writing this book? What are your sources? How much of it is primary?
Actually, I started a long time ago, because when I was working in advertising, my head office in New York said to me, go to Vietnam. I want you to find out more about the country. Is it worthwhile opening up a branch in, at the time, Saigon? And I went there and I talked to a lot of people, decided that we weren't ready to open an ad agency yet because this was before the period of Doi Moi. Does anybody know what Doi Moi is? Hands up. Doi Moi. What is Doi Moi, sir? Rejuvenation. Yeah, it's trying to get, it's the perestroika of Vietnam, trying to get the Vietnamese into the world of trade and capitalism in its own way. And so I was there before Doi Moi. I went back since, and it was a changed country as a result. And as I had more frequent trips to Vietnam, I fell in love with the country and its history. Because I spoke, and interesting, I spoke French to some of the ex-Viet Minh soldiers who'd fought, and to a man, they hated the French. And in the streets, the young people loved the Americans. And you wouldn't believe this, the most popular film when I was there in the 90s was a Hollywood movie about this chap who goes around killing people after having got back from Vietnam, played by some dreadful Italo-American actor. The film was called Rambo. And would you believe it? That was the most popular film when I was there, when I was visiting there. So there you go. I got caught up in Vietnam. That's why I wrote this book. Right. Then I discovered that he'd been in Thailand. That's another main reason, because not many people know about that. And so that's when I started doing research in Thailand. And I actually took his journey, talked to different people, and realized that it was quite a journey that he took through the jungles of Phetchabun and Lue and onto Udon. Yes. Any other questions?
Yes, I'm quite interested in the literature that surrounds Ho Chi Minh. I mean, as you said in your speech, this is one of the most influential individuals in Southeast Asia.
Absolutely.
You know, he affected Vietnam, he affected America, France, and it would seem also was influential in Thailand in a more peripheral kind of way. So why does this character not get more attention in the literary world? And would your book be sold in modern day Vietnam? Can we send that book over there?
No. It's banned. I like to say it's banned in Vietnam. In fact, my publisher from Singapore, my Singaporean publisher, Talisman, tried to get distribution. The reason by the way, let's just backtrack a bit, because the first book I wrote on Ho Chi Minh was called The Siamese Trail of Ho Chi Minh. It was published by the Bangkok Post, but it was only distributed in about 5 different shops in Bangkok, and that's it. I literally had to take a few copies to Chiang Mai to distribute them in bookshops in the north. So it had very limited readership and sales. And as we approach the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, I decided to rewrite the book. And so it coincided with this momentous event. And I took my new typescript, that's what they call them nowadays, not manuscripts, typescripts, to a publisher in Singapore. And one Ian Pringle, the owner and director of Talisman Books, had faith in the book, and we launched it to coincide this year with the fall of Saigon. And more importantly, he gave me worldwide distribution in English language countries. It's available throughout Southeast Asia except Vietnam, in Britain, in Europe, and in the United States. Yes.
And, but I mean, who were the key sources? You mentioned Sophie Quinn Judge, who...
Oh, I read all the books,
all
French, including, interestingly, some newly available Vietnamese sources. People who had actually wrote about his Thai journey. And they actually made a film, a rather heroic film of this Ho in Siam. And there's a film, a rather handsome Ho. Whatever you say about Ho, you can't say he's very handsome. But they got the most glamorous-looking Vietnamese actor to play his part, and about the story of his journey through Siam. But it had very little. It was nothing like my book. It was purely heroic. I've been trying to get hold of the film, but if anybody has seen it, I'd be most grateful to share this film with them.
One of the interesting things that you coloured out quite early on was this relationship. The Thai monarchy, in fact, was very dubious towards the French and was quite encouraging.
That's right.
Of having a Vietnamese diaspora here and encouraging revolution or at least resistance. And you mentioned that there were 30,000 people up in that northeastern. Yeah, from Pitchett across.
Across through Leh, Phetchabun, and right to Nakhon Phanom.
And of course, they became a huge issue in the Vietnam War because the Thai were very uncertain about their loyalties, and there was talk of repatriation there. But you know, you talk about Chulalongkorn, Vajiralongkorn, and Prachadip Pok, who would have been the king at the time that Ho Chi Minh was here.
Right.
But anyway, quite often you get books that are, you know, full of a very interesting story, but they're quite clunkily written, and you have to look beyond that. But I found some of the stuff that you've written very evocative, and I'm just going to read a paragraph that appears early on. The first thing Ai Kwok, which was one of the pseudonyms of Ho Chi Minh, noticed at the port of Bangkok was the total absence of European officials at immigration and customs checkpoints. They were all Thai. This was his first visit to Siam, and he was pleasantly surprised to see that this was truly an independent country where the locals managed their own affairs. From the rickshaws into town, senior police officers he saw on duty on the streets were Thai. What a change from his home in Annam, that's Vietnam, where there were French police everywhere, he thought. I mean, I think it's evocative. I mean, that's very observant. You've drawn in your knowledge in a way that actually a lot of people wouldn't do. But that is, for me, one of the strengths of this book. But is it reliable history? That clearly is what I've just quoted. But
right. I tried to, part of the book, I must confess, Confessions of a Writer. Part of it is fictional. I've had to invent a few characters to enhance his journey. For example, the abbot that he meets in Phetchabun, in the church, the temple is there. I know I made some research. There was an abbot who actually lived there and died during Ho Chi Minh's time. So I relaunched him, so to speak. And and made it into a character. So he has this dialogue with Ho Chi Minh on spiritual and spiritual matters.
Right. And Wong, can you explain
Oh
Wong
yes,
a
Wong
bit more?
I really love because there were a lot of Thai Viets, half Thais, half Vietnamese, mostly Thai wives married to Vietnamese men. They were called Thai Viets. And a lot of them actually volunteered to work for Ho Chi Minh and become, help them as interpreters and help to teach Vietnamese Thai customs. Because you know that the Thai, Sipsong Chu Thai, the Thai tribes in northwestern Vietnam, near a place called Saba, that area, very cold part of Vietnam, they've never really liked the Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese always treated them badly. So they were, a lot of them fought for the French, did not, even in Dien Bien Phu, it was very hard for Ho to get the Thais on side. Although part of the success of Dien Bien Phu was, the Battle of Dien Bien Phu was getting he got Thai people to carry the bits of artillery up the mountain. They were all Thai tribes who carried them on poles and baskets and reassembled the guns on the top of the mountain.
Yeah, on bicycles.
Yeah.
Right, we've mesmerised the audience. They're behaving as if they're watching television. Their brains have stopped. Fortunately, Sam Wright is going to ask a question.
Well, a question I often get asked. Oh, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's coming. Sam, you go first.
Sam Wright, club member. Thank you for most interesting, informative, and
Thank you.
kind of a romantic sweep. I've often been puzzled by the comment, "I'm not a communist," that he made in the appeal. And at one point I thought, well, how did it end up as a communist government? Was it because of that rejection? But then as I read further, I just ran across that when the first government was formed with Ho Chi Minh, it was an alliance with other nationalist groups. And they were a large part, but not necessarily the dominant one. But within 2 years, all those other parties were either killed
That's
or
right.
taken out of the government, and it became a total communist government,
That's
which
correct.
then casts a doubt on the original statement about, oh, well, I'm not a communist. Was that just a statement, do you think, that was conveniently politically manipulative?
Yes, well, I thought about that for a long time, what you've just said. But he played both sides. He was nationalist before he was communist. Of course, the communists helped a lot. I must point out, and people don't often ask me this question, where did he get his arms and his ammunition from? Well, he got them from Russia and from China. And there was one point where Russia decided that they're not going to help him anymore because it cost them money. And Stalin said to Mao Zedong, well, it's all yours, Vietnam is yours. And in 1954, after the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, just 2 days after the battle, Chu Enlai, the foreign minister, went over to France to talk to the French foreign minister. Mendès France was his name. Oh, he's the prime minister. And tried to negotiate a separate deal because the Chinese wanted out of Vietnam. It was costing them too much money. But that's another story. I'm sorry, does that answer your question? Yes.
Yes, hello, good evening, and thank you very much indeed for, sorry, was there any comeback that you would like to say? Or no? Thank you very much.
Can you introduce yourself, sorry?
Yes, sorry. My name is Paul Westover. I'm a club member. And thank you very much indeed for a very interesting talk. Very much enjoyed it.
Thank you.
It's not so much a question, but I thought you might be interested in just a little bit of colour to the story about Frank Loadsby and the legal work that he did in Hong Kong. When I first went to work in Hong Kong in 1991, I joined the Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club. And there was a lovely lady who was a doyen of the bar, a tremendous raconteur, Pat Loadsby, who was the daughter of Frank.
Oh, right.
And she really was a tremendous character in the yacht club. But just a little bit of colour that I wanted to mention was that every time she went to Vietnam, she was treated like absolute royalty.
Yes, that I've
And
found
they
out
still
too,
recognise
yes.
that in the 90s. And really, really, really as a...
Right.
And then finally, just because I know you love advertising, as a retired lawyer, I'd just like to advertise the benefits of English common law, because what Frank Loadsby used was the writ of habeas corpus.
That's right.
Hand over the body, which of course is ancient law, common law.
Right.
But still exists today. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for a very entertaining talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Question?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Deborah Geraro. I'm
Hello,
from
Deborah.
Chad in Central Africa. Chad is a former French colony, so I was very interested to learn about the history of Vietnam and France as well.
Right.
Chad gained independence in 1960 from France. And since then, there was a form of neo-colonialism. And currently, for the past 5 years, with the new generation born after 1960, there's now a quest for a new form of decolonization of 26 French-speaking African countries. So I was just curious, in the history of Vietnam, after the departure of the French and Vietnam gaining independence, how was the history or the presence of France in the country post-colonial? Did they still keep a way of maintaining some form of soft power on Vietnam? And did France also have some cultural influences in the country, or was it just a complete departure? Thank you.
Yes, a very interesting question. Politicians always say, that's a very interesting question when they can't answer it. So it's a very interesting question. All I can tell you was that I happened to be traveling through France in 1954, when Dien Bien Phu battle was over, and my parents, who were working in France at the time, we were together in a car, in an American car, a Chevrolet, and we stopped at a village, and all these villagers came out to look at us, and they discovered that we were Vietnamese. In fact, we weren't. We kept on saying, Siamois, nous sommes Siamois. Siamois and Vietnamese is pretty similar to them. And they spat over our car, all of them. The whole village came out to spit at our car, which is something I will always remember. So the French felt it was an embarrassing moment for them in world history, having lost Dien Bien Phu. But I think there is a resurgence of neo-colonialism all over the world today, in the West anyway. And so, and there are other colonial countries on the horizon, ready to grab any country that's up for grabs. I'm thinking of China, I'm thinking of Russia. They're both neo-colonialists, are they not? I'm glad you agree with me. I hope there are no Russians or Chinese here.
Do we have any French in the room tonight? Okay, carry on.
Yes, I'm Kirk Person from SIL Global. Thank you so much for a fascinating presentation. And as Dominic mentioned at the beginning, you are an incredibly productive writer. So I was curious, being a room full of many writers or aspiring writers, what is your writing routine? What habits have propelled you in this way? So that's the first question. And then the next question is not what is your next book, but what are your next 5 books?
Well, the first question is very hard to answer because I'm totally without discipline. So that's a tough one. I think all writers either have a regular routine, the successful ones, because they're making a lot of money. But if you're not making any money, and you don't have that drive to write, to put food on the table. Fortunately, I have other means to put food on the table, so I don't depend on writing. In fact, I started writing late in my life. Your second question was, a writer, and I think people who write will agree with me, and I see several writers here, they've always got a few books up here, ready to go. But if they're not disciplined like me, they can't go. They just think about it and contemplate their belly button most of the time, thinking of what they're going to write. There are a few books that are in my head at the moment. One is called The Lions, the Khmer Lions, about some lions in Cambodia that were bronze lions that were taken when, this is getting political now, when Cambodia fell, when Angkor Wat fell to the Thais of Ayutthaya in 1215 or thereabouts. The Thais actually took away a lot of, they plundered the whole city and left, as you know, left it to the jungle, kind of like Carthage, delenda est, and took everything from Cambodia, including some lions. So I'm writing about these lions and how they ended up in different places around the world. They started off with maybe 3 or 4 lions. There are only about 2 left. 2 are in Mandalay, I think, and the others are in different parts of the world. And there's another book that I'm dreaming of too. It's called The Year of the Dog. And it's right after the war, when the countries of Asia, particularly the countries that were colonized, they thought that the Japanese were going to help liberate them, and they had to make a quick decision. Even Lee Kuan Yew, he didn't work for the Japanese, but he did do a few errands for them. And of course, the most famous collaborator with the Japanese was the Indonesian leader right after the war. He actually worked with them. Yes. Good. Right. I could go on about all the books I've been dreaming of, but
okay, maybe
maybe
I
it to
could.
dreams. Oh yes.
Maybe I should.
You have heard my talk before. You're a
No.
real glutton for punishment, aren't you?
Maybe I should have more drinks with you, Uncle Teddy, because I have this book in my head for 3 years already. Prada People Sankram Memo, Cat 7.5 Life. But it's still in my head. Anyway, I'm his wife, nephew. And this book is very interesting because next year, Thailand and Vietnam will celebrate our 50th anniversary. And
That's right.
And I'm on a committee of Thai-Vietnam Friendship Association. And he said, there's a lot, the Vietnamese Thai. I attend a lot of their function. Is unbelievable, it's amazing. The community is solid and happy lot. They're happy in Thailand, and Ho Chi Minh, we have his statue in Phnom Penh. I think you have visited there. Anyway, it's a pity it's not sold. It's banned in Vietnam. Maybe there will be a second edition with some addition that could be sold in Vietnam because it contains a lot of good information for the Vietnamese to know. And one of the important part is the Thai role in the Vietnamese independence. And one of the name which maybe should be mentioned in the book, is Priti Phnom Yong.
Right.
He sent 3,000 guns. I mean, the Vietnam cannot kill, cannot fight independence with bamboos. Impossible. The Thai, he sent 3,000 guns to the Vietnamese movement to fight for independence. And I don't know what else kind of network he has built during his 18 months in Thailand. I think he has a lot of impact because at that time, communism is either communism, democracy. I mean, monarchy is gone. So it's either communism or democracy. So I think he has built a strong network of his friends also in Thailand. But that 3,000 weapons that Priti Phnom Yong, the prime minister, he was a prime minister, it was very important, I think, in the fight for independence. And I think Uncle Ho, timing was perfect. He knew France was under Nazi. Even the Thai people went into France because he got a signal that you can go into Laos because France cannot defend it. So I think it's interesting to note from the book that Ho Chi Minh started his movement in 1940-41 when France was already under Nazi and has no way to defend itself. But of course, from there until the end of the war to 1954, the Thai support a lot for that movement of independence. It would be interesting to bring that out, I think, in your next second edition, with some addition, so we can sell that in Vietnam. I'd like to be your distributor.
Actually, be the third edition. This one is the second edition, in a way.
So on that note, the book is available at the back of the room. So when you race off there to pay your money, form an orderly queue, and then you can come back and...
With pleasure.
Our author will be very happy to sign it. So it's been a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much.
interesting.
Thank you for being so...
There's 3 here.
Start off with 3. I did my Christmas.